Shaw and McKay's theory took on this form that was based on the idea of socially disorganized neighborhoods. They believed that the socially disorganized neighborhood would then lead to a failure of informal social controls, which then led to increased gang activity, which then enforced the cultural transmission of delinquent actions, and that then had the eventual results of increasing delinquent activity. From an overall perspective, Shaw and McKay thought that juvenile delinquency resulted from the breakdown of social control among the traditional primary groups, such as the family and the neighborhood, due to the social disorganization of the neighborhood. The Chicago School concluded that life in deteriorated neighborhoods was the root cause of delinquency, and that the delinquent acts were a way for the youth to overcome their grim circumstances. They found that the economic and occupational structures of the larger society around them was more influential on the rates of delinquent behavior than was the social life of the community. They found that crime and delinquency rates in these areas were a result of their class position in society, and not because they were new to the country or lacked acculturation to American institutions and values. Their general conclusion was that they could predict rates of delinquency through mapping the different structures and occupations within the city. This is called mapping theory. Shaw and McKay's findings were tested in depth in the 1960s and the 1970s to determine if the patterns they had discovered were consistent over a longer period of time. Robert Bursik found that the patterns stayed the same over the 40s, the 1960s, and the 1970s, but there was a change in the patterns and rates in the 1950s. This, though, was attributable to the effects of white flight and the then changes in housing laws that allowed blacks to move into what had been white neighborhoods. There was also a general rise of delinquency in the 1960s, particularly in urban areas, due to the racial strife that was occurring during that time. There, of course, was a large spike in the public order crimes for youth that lived in predominantly black neighborhoods in urban areas. Shaw and McKay developed a theory based on what are known as concentric circles. Now, this idea of ecological patterns was not new. It had been developed previously at the Chicago School by Park and Burgess. Park and Burgess had mapped out urban communities and found that all urban areas had similar types of physical characteristics that roughly conformed to the concentric circles model. Shaw and McKay had mapped out urban communities and found that all these urban areas had similar types of physical characteristics that roughly conformed to the concentric circle model of Park and Burgess. McKay and Shaw considered the delinquency rates found in Chicago, and they found that over a 33-year period, that the vast majority of delinquent boys came from either areas adjacent to the central business and industrial areas of the city or along the two forks of the Chicago River. Once Shaw and McKay found that delinquency rates were higher in these areas, they then took this concentric model and overlaid it on the Chicago area. When Shaw and McKay measured delinquency rates and the differences between the concentric circles, they found that the further away from the inner ring one went, the lower the delinquency rate. The highest rates of delinquency were in Zone 1, the central city. The next highest rate was in Zone 2, outside the central city, and so forth as one worked their way outward. Eventually, Shaw and McKay would refocus their analysis from the influence of social disorganization of the community to the importance of local economic structures affecting the high rates of delinquency that they were finding in the inner city. This would then shape what they termed differential opportunity structure theory.